Claude responded, 17 years after I pulled a 10-year-old boy out of a laundromat dryer vent where he'd been hiding from the rain, his self-made millionaire father walked. 17 years after I pulled a 10-year-old boy out of a laundromat dryer vent where he'd been hiding from the rain, his self-made millionaire father walked into his college graduation and handed him a set of keys to a downtown penthouse. "You've earned the right to come home now, son." My boy looked at those keys for a long time. Then he turned around and looked at me. I wish I could tell you what was going through his mind. I couldn't have told you what was going through mine either. I was standing near the very back of the crowd at Ohio State's business school ceremony, holding a card with $200 folded inside it, money I'd pulled from what was supposed to go toward a new furnace. My old brown sport coat still fit, mostly, though I'd had to leave the top button undone. My hip had been aching since the drive up from Zanesville, and I'd worn the good shoes anyway because some habits from being raised right don't leave a man. None of that mattered until I saw who was standing next to my son on the lawn outside the auditorium. The man's name was Richard Colton. Anybody who read a business magazine in the last 15 years would recognize it. Colton Freight Logistics, trucks with his name on the side running up and down every interstate in the Midwest. He had the kind of tailored calm that made people around him stand up a little straighter without meaning to. He was holding out a small leather folio. My son, Caleb, took it from him. And for one shameful second, I looked down at the card in my hand and felt smaller than I had in years. That's where the story landed. But it started 18 years before that, on a Tuesday night in a laundromat on Maple Avenue in Zanesville, Ohio, when I was 51 years old and still running my own little appliance repair shop 3 blocks down. I'd stopped in that laundromat because my dryer at the shop had quit, and I needed my uniform shirts done before morning. Rain was coming down sideways, the kind that finds its way into your collar no matter how you walk. I fed quarters into a machine and sat down with a newspaper I wasn't really reading. That's when I noticed the dryer at the far end wasn't tumbling clothes. It was tumbling nothing. And every few seconds I heard something shift inside it. I got up and knocked on the glass door, gentle. "Hey, you okay in there?" "Nothing. I'm going to open this door now, all right?" Nice and slow. When I pulled it open, a boy folded himself out of that drum like he'd practiced it. Maybe 8, maybe 9. I found out later he was 10, just small for it. His jacket was 2 sizes too big and soaked through anyway. He backed up against the wall of washing machines like I was going to grab him. "I wasn't doing anything," he said. "Didn't say you were." I kept my hands where he could see them. "It's just usually people put clothes in there before they climb in after them." That got the smallest flicker across his face, gone as fast as it came. "It's dry in there, and warm when it's been running." "Has it been running?" "Not since I got in it." I asked if he was hungry. He said no, too fast, the way kids say no when the true answer is always. There was a vending machine by the door. I bought a bag of chips and a bottled water and set them on the folding table without pushing them toward him. Just left them there and went back to reading my paper like it wasn't anything. It took him almost 10 minutes to cross the room for them. He ate slow, like a person rationing something, and about halfway through he wrapped half the chips back in the bag and stuffed it in his jacket pocket. "You saving those?" Might get hungry again. Something in my chest did a slow turn I wasn't ready for. "What's your name, son?" He hesitated so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "Caleb." "I'm Walter." He nodded, didn't offer anything else. I asked where his people were. His shoulders went up around his ears like a turtle pulling in. "I'm fine out here." A boy sleeping in a clothes dryer on a rainy Tuesday isn't fine, and we both knew it, but I didn't push. I told him I needed to step out and make a call, and I did it quiet, over by the door, but not quiet enough. When I turned back around, the folding chair was empty, and the door to the parking lot was swinging shut. I found him 2 blocks down, soaked through, moving fast for a kid that size. My knee wasn't built for chasing anybody, but I caught up when he slipped on a wet manhole cover and went down hard on one hip. "I'm not taking you anywhere," I said, stopping well short of him. "I called the police because it's the law when I find a kid alone at night, not because I want you gone. I'm not going back." His voice cracked on the word back. "Back where?" He didn't answer that one. Just wrapped his arms around himself and stared at me like I was one more thing about to hurt him. The patrol car showed up 9 minutes later, and a caseworker named Diane Furlong came about 40 minutes after that, a heavy-set woman in a county-issued windbreaker who looked like she hadn't had a full night's sleep since Clinton was in office. She got Caleb calm enough to sit in the back of her car, and she pulled me aside while he watched us through the window. "He ran from a group home 2 counties over," she said. "Older boys in there, He won't say what happened, but I've got a good guess, and I don't like it. Where's his family? Mother's unreachable. Father's name isn't on anything. She glanced back at the car. He's been in and out of placement since he was 4. I asked what happened next. She said tonight, emergency shelter. Tomorrow, paperwork, and probably another county, another house, another set of strangers. I didn't bring Caleb home that night. That's not how it works, whatever the movies tell you. But I called Diane Furlong the next morning, and again 3 days after that, and when she finally explained what it would take a widower, 51 years old, no children of his own, running a one-man repair shop to get licensed as a foster parent, I signed every form anyway. Background check, home inspection. 11 weeks of training on Saturday mornings that ate into my only day off. Financial disclosures that made me feel like I was confessing to something. It took 9 months before Caleb walked through my front door in Zanesville with everything he owned inside a gym bag with a broken zipper. He stood in my living room and looked around like he was pricing the exits. How long do I get to stay here? However long they'll let me keep you. He didn't like that answer, and I understood why. For the first month, he hid crackers in his dresser drawer and slept with his shoes on. He packed his gym bag every single morning before school, like he expected somebody to come move him again before the bell rang. One night, he knocked a coffee mug off the counter reaching for a glass, and it shattered across the kitchen floor. He went stone still, hands locked at his sides, face gone white as printer paper, watching me the way you'd watch weather rolling in. I got the broom. It's a mug, kid. I've got 3 more exactly like it. That's it? What else is there supposed to be? His chin started going, and then he sat down right there on the kitchen tile and cried in a way that scared me a little, like something had been backed up in him for years and finally found a crack to get out through. Almost 2 years after that, a judge in Muskingum County finalized the adoption, and outside the courthouse, Caleb held onto my sleeve and asked if this meant nobody could move him anywhere ever again. Not unless you're planning on shipping me off to a nursing home someday. That got a laugh out of him, a real one, and he called me Dad for the first time walking down those courthouse steps. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't find out until years later, was that Richard Colton had known where his son was the whole time. He'd known which county, which school, which repair shop his boy came home to every day after class. For 18 years, that man watched from wherever men like that watch from, and he never once knocked on my door. The years in between are the ones I hold on to tightest, even now. When Caleb was 11, I bought him a bicycle at an estate sale for $8. Orange under 3 coats of rust, front tire flat as a pancake. You paid money for that? $8 is an investment, not a purchase. In what, tetanus? We spent 2 Saturday afternoons in the driveway, sanding it down and repainting it a green that didn't quite match anything. The first time he rode it without me holding the seat, he made it to the end of the block before clipping the curb and going into Ferguson's rose bushes. I hurried over. He was already dragging the bike upright before I got there, blood running down one elbow. Don't help me. Wasn't going to. You were walking fast. That's just how I walk. He'd take a bandage eventually, once he'd proven to himself he could survive the scrape on his own terms. That was Caleb from the start, nothing given, everything earned, even from me. At 13, he got suspended for shoving a kid into a row of lockers. The assistant principal called me at the shop. Caleb sat in that office with his arms crossed and a scrape across one knuckle. And when I asked what happened, he said the other boy had called him a foster kid like it was a diagnosis. I wanted to tell him I understood exactly how that landed. Instead, I said, "You're apologizing to him tomorrow." He started it. He used words. You used your hands. So which one of us is supposed to be smarter here? He didn't talk to me the whole drive home. I stopped at the diner on 6th Street anyway. He stared at the menu like it had personally wronged him. Thought I was grounded. You are. Grounded people still eat pie. Somewhere around the second bite, he said, I hate when you're right and calm about it at the same time. Most kids your age say that eventually. He apologized to the boy the next morning. Didn't mean every word of it, said them anyway. By high school, Caleb had turned into the kind of student teachers remembered for the questions he asked after the bell rang, not the ones he answered in class. He was sharp with numbers in a way I never was. When he hit trigonometry, I sat at that kitchen table 3 nights, running with a legal pad and a stack of borrowed textbooks, trying to keep up so I could help him. And I still got half the problems wrong. You flipped the sign, Dad. Testing you. You wrote, I hate cosine in the margin. Also part of the test. He laughed so hard he had to put his fork down. Those Tuesday nights are what I remember clearest now, clearer than any birthday burnt grilled cheese, arguments about curfew, ordinary nothing. That's how you build a home. Not in one big gesture, piece by piece, when nobody's keeping score. When Caleb got into Ohio State's business program on a partial scholarship, he came running into the shop, waving the letter over his head. The scholarship covered tuition. It didn't cover housing, meal plans, books, lab fees for the statistics course he needed, or the 100 small charges that colleges never mention until the bill arrives. I told him we'd figure it out. He told me not to do anything foolish. So naturally, I sold the shop's second van, the one I kept for house calls on weekends, a rattling old Chevy I'd had since before his mother passed. A mechanic 2 towns over gave me $3,800 for it, and I stood in the lot and watched him tow it away. Caleb noticed the empty space behind the shop that weekend. "Where's the van?" "Sold it." His face changed. "Why?" "That was Mom's route van. She used to ride with you on Saturdays. You needed the housing deposit. You don't get to keep giving pieces of yourself away for me." "I'm not giving anything away. I'm putting it where it does the most good." He didn't have an answer for that, but he didn't like it either, and he told me one day he'd buy me a van twice as good. I told him I'd settle for him calling his old man more than once a month during finals week. College changed him the way it's supposed to. He got sharper, more sure of himself, and a little further away, which was exactly what I wanted and somehow harder to watch than I expected. Around the same time, my body started keeping its own ledger against me. My hip, which had never fully recovered from that laundromat parking lot all those years back, started complaining on cold mornings. My hands shook a little when I did fine soldering work at the shop. I told myself it was nothing. Just 60 catching up to me. I closed the shop 2 years before I'd planned to, after a bad fall off a stepladder replacing a customer's dryer belt. Nothing broke, but something in me knew it was the last warning I'd get. I didn't tell Caleb how bad the hip actually was. He was buried in his senior capstone, a logistics routing system for small businesses, which he liked to joke was his way of making sure no widower ever had to run parts across 3 counties in a van held together with duct tape again. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He called one evening while I was heating up soup from a can. "Did you take your pills?" "Yes, ma'am." "Which ones?" "The big one and the small one." A pause. "You sound tired, Dad." "I'm retired. Tired's part of the job title." He didn't laugh that time. "You'd tell me if something was wrong." "Of course." That answer came out faster than it should have, and we both heard it. By graduation morning, I'd convinced myself I was fine. I left Zanesville before 6 in my own truck, wearing the brown sport coat from my late wife's funeral because it was the only thing close to formal still hanging in my closet. In the glove box sat a card with $200 and a note that said, "For whatever comes next." I parked 3 lots further than I needed to and walked slow, stopping now and then to admire the campus whenever my hip demanded it. When Caleb crossed that stage, I was on my feet before the row around me. "That's my son," I told the woman next to me. "I can tell," she said. "You're the only one standing." After the ceremony, the crowd spilled out onto the lawn in front of the business school, everybody hunting for their own graduate in the sea of black gowns. I was still working my way through the crush of families when I spotted Caleb standing near the edge of the walkway. Beside him stood a tall man in a gray suit that probably cost more than my truck, and behind them both, parked at the curb where campus security should have chased it off but clearly hadn't dared, sat a black car so clean it looked like it had never touched a Midwestern road. I recognized the man before Caleb ever said his name. Richard Colton had been on the cover of a business magazine I'd flipped through once at the barbershop, something about disruption in freight logistics, a self-made fortune built out of a single truck 25 years back. I hadn't thought about that magazine cover in years. I thought about it hard in that moment. "Caleb," his voice carried, pitched just loud enough that the small crowd gathering nearby could hear every word. "I know this is a shock. I should have come sooner. I've watched what you've built here, and I am so proud of the man you've become." He held out the leather folio. "These are the keys to the Colton Tower penthouse on 5th. It's yours. Consider it the start of making up for lost time. You've proven you're worthy of coming home, son." A phone or two came up around us. Caleb took the folio slow, like it might be hot to the touch. Then he turned his head and looked straight at me, and for the length of about 3 heartbeats, I had no idea what was about to come out of his mouth. "Mr. Colton," Caleb said finally, and his voice was steady in a way that told me he'd rehearsed this moment in his head 100 times without ever telling me. "I have a question, And I want you to answer it honestly, right here, in front of whoever's filming this. Colton's smile flickered but held. Anything. Did you know where I was? All those years I was in the system. All those years I was in Walter's house on Ridgeline Street. Did you know? The silence that followed lasted longer than it should have. I did, Colton said. I knew. For how long? Almost from the start. Somebody in the small crowd made a sound, a sharp intake of breath. Caleb didn't flinch. Then you knew I was safe, and you knew I had a home, and you knew exactly who was in it. He looked at me again, and something in his face softened even as his voice stayed level. And you still waited 18 years and a graduation stage to knock. Colton's jaw tightened. I wanted to give you space to build your own life first. No, Caleb said, quiet now, almost gentle. You wanted to wait until I had a diploma with your last name's kind of prestige attached to it, so that whatever this is, he lifted the folio slightly, would look like a gift and not a debt collection. He held the folio back out. Colton didn't take it right away. I don't want the penthouse, Caleb said. I don't want the keys. What I want is 30 minutes of your time somewhere without cameras, where you tell me the truth about why you stayed away, and I decide afterward whether there's room in my life for you. Not the other way around. Colton looked at the folio, then at the small ring of onlookers with their phones still raised, then finally set the folio down on the low stone wall beside the walkway, instead of forcing it back into Caleb's hands. All right, he said. Just tell me when. Caleb didn't answer him again that day. He walked back over to me, put his cap under one arm, and said, Let's go get pie, Dad. I'm starving, and none of this is more important than that right now. We didn't talk about Colton again until 2 weeks later, when Caleb asked me to come with him to a small diner off Route 40, halfway between Zanesville and wherever Colton kept his downtown office. I almost said no. I didn't know what my place was supposed to be in a conversation like that. Caleb just said, You raised me. You're not sitting this one out, and that settled it. Colton was already at the booth when we got there. No assistant, no driver waiting outside, just a man in a plain jacket that looked like he'd bought it specifically not to stand out. He stood when Caleb walked in and sat back down slow when Caleb gestured for him to. I'm not here for an apology tour, Caleb said, sliding into the booth across from him. I want the truth, all of it. Colton nodded like he'd expected exactly that. Your mother left when you were 3. I wasn't equipped to raise you alone, I want to be honest, not excused, when I say that. I had a business that was collapsing in on itself, and I made the choice to let the county take custody while I tried to save what I'd built. And after you saved it, I told myself I'd come back once things were stable. Colton looked down at his hands. Every year, stable turned into something further out. I got reports. I knew about the group home situation, and I want you to know that when I found out, I panicked, and I pulled every string I had to get you moved somewhere safer. That's how you ended up in the county that led you to Walter. I felt my stomach turn over at that. All those years, I'd believed the placement had been random county paperwork, dumb luck. It hadn't been luck at all. You engineered where I landed, Caleb said slowly, and then you just watched. I watched your report cards. I watched your science fair ribbons come up in the file updates. I watched you get suspended for that fight in 8th grade. And I watched the follow-up note that said you'd apologize the next morning without being forced to. Colton's voice cracked. Just slightly, the first real crack I'd heard in it. I told myself I was protecting you by staying invisible. The truth is I was protecting myself from finding out I couldn't fix what I'd broken. Caleb didn't say anything for a long moment. The company, he finally said, not the money, the actual routing system, the driver networks, the parts of it that could actually help people. Is that why you're really here? Investors sniffing around a succession story, needing an heir with a business degree to make the balance sheet look good? Colton's silence answered before his words did. There's some truth in that, he admitted. My board has been asking about succession for 2 years. When I heard you'd gotten into the program, and then heard what your senior project was, Caleb, it does what I built my whole company trying to do. It does it better. I won't pretend that wasn't part of what pulled me toward that stage. So it wasn't just about me. No, Colton said. It wasn't only about you. I'm sorry. That's the truth, and you asked for it. Caleb sat with that for a while. Then he said, I believe that you're sorry. But being sorry and being trustworthy aren't the same thing. And I'm not interested in a relationship built on whatever's convenient for your board this quarter. I understand. If we're going to have anything at all, there are conditions. You don't show up anywhere Walter is without asking first. You don't ever refer to him as anything other than my father. Not the foster parent, not the man who raised you, my father. You don't buy me things hoping they'll stand in for 18 years. And if I ever catch you telling a reporter or an investor a story where you're the one who raised me, we're done, permanently. Colton didn't hesitate. Agreed. All of it. They talked another hour after that, mostly about small things: Caleb's coursework, Colton's own father, who it turned out had also walked out on him young, which didn't excuse anything but did explain a little. When we stood to leave, Colton reached into his jacket, and I felt my shoulders lock up out of old habit. "It's not a gift," he said quickly, catching the look on both our faces. He set a folded index card on the table. "That's my direct line. No assistant screens it. If either of you ever wants to talk, that's how you reach me." Caleb took the card without promising anything. Neither did I. Some doors you leave unlocked without saying so out loud. The penthouse deed went back to Colton's lawyers within the month. Caleb didn't want it, didn't need it, and told Colton plainly that if he wanted to do something that actually mattered, he could fund something real instead. So Colton did a foundation, seeded with the value of that penthouse and then some, providing transitional housing and paid apprenticeships for kids aging out of foster care with no family to land with. Caleb helped design the intake system himself, free of charge, over one long weekend at my kitchen table. He also insisted on paying off the note on my shop building, the one I'd been quietly behind on since the stepladder fall. I argued for 4 days straight. "I don't need you covering my bills, Caleb. You didn't raise me so I'd owe you money," he said. "You raised me so I'd know how to take care of people. This is just me doing what you taught." I didn't have an answer for that one either. The following spring, almost a year to the day after graduation, Caleb drove me out to a boat launch on Buckeye Lake. There was a used van waiting in the gravel lot, nothing fancy, faded paint, decent tires. The kind of thing a repairman could put 150,000 honest miles on. "You kept your promise?" I said. "No," he said, grinning. "You kept yours first. I'm just running a little behind." We spent that whole afternoon loading and unloading tools we didn't need into the back of that van just to hear the doors shut right, and it was about as good a day as I've had in years. Before we left, Caleb asked a stranger in the parking lot to take one photo. Not next to the van, next to my old Chevy truck, the one still sitting in my driveway back home with 200,000 miles on it and a check engine light that's more suggestion than warning at this point. "Smile, Dad." I did. That photograph sits on my mantle now, next to my late wife's picture. People sometimes ask why there's no photo from graduation day, no shot of the penthouse folio or the black car at the curb. The answer's simple enough. Those things were never going to carry either of us anywhere that mattered. The old truck already had. Getting older teaches you something, if you let it. Most of us aren't afraid of gray hair or bad hips or a smaller pension check than we planned on. We're afraid of becoming unnecessary, of waking up one day and realizing the people we spent our whole lives loving have quietly moved on past us into a life we're not part of anymore. Caleb taught me different. If you spend years raising somebody with patience and plain honesty, there comes a day they stop needing you to fix every last thing. But they never stop knowing exactly where home is. Richard Colton gave my son his blood. I was lucky enough to be given the rest of it. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. If somebody in your own life proved that family gets built out of who shows up, not who happens to share your last name, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. Stories like that are worth remembering out loud. Claude responded, "Home was never the address on a deed or the badge on a car. It was a mug swept up without a word of blame. A van sold quietly so a dream could fit inside a do. Home was never the address on a deed or the badge on a car. It was a mug swept up without a word of blame. A van sold quietly so a dream could fit inside a dorm room." Love doesn't announce itself with cameras rolling. It just keeps showing up year after ordinary year, until one day the person you raised looks at you like you're the whole reason they know how to stand. A small note for you. This story was written and imagined by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its gentle life lessons still found a way to your heart.